episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Whether you're watching a video or listening to a podcast, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. Links to videos or MP3 files can be found on MiamiGhostChronicles.com. Go to MarlenePardo.com for information on new book releases. I narrate several podcast series that can be found on major podcast platforms and can also be listened to via Alexa, Sonos, and other home systems. Look for Supernatural Storytime for scary storytelling, Nightshade Diary for classic horror and adventure stories, Stories of the Supernatural for interviews with different guests on the show. If you want to get noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com or find us on Blogspot. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Even though the show is a little bit staggered, I do want to wish everybody a happy new year. Going into 2022, believe it or not. And also a belated Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever the case might be. I always make comments on this. I went to, because this thing about the commercialism. I just went to the department store a couple of days ago, and it's like, all the Christmas trees, holidays, you name it, it's like gone. And now it's Valentine's Day. It was like, what? It's incredible. They've got this empty shelf spaces. Of course, they filled it up, and it's like next holiday on tap. I was like, hey, hold on. But yeah, that's basically the way we run it. But yeah, we're into 2022. We're right there, and hopefully it'll be a better year. How's that? But anyway, guys. I promise I'm going to do my chicken thing. I've just been so busy that I haven't had any chance to do anything with my chickens. By the way, contrary to what I had said in my last show, that I was going to wait till the spring or summer to let one of my broody hens hatch some chicks, I decided against it. I have lost the chickens to my nemesis, that large bird of prey. I don't know what it is. Thankfully, it hasn't come back. That I decided I've got one of my small hens. She's a really good mommy. She's like part bantam. She's really good. And she went broody, and I've got some stairs into a shed, and she crept in there, and I'm going to let her have 7 eggs. Today being December 30th, the first day. I'll let you know what comes of it in 3 weeks, 21 days approximately. Which is, I'm going to let her, and then I'll just pick her up and the chicks, and I'll put them someplace safe. I can't let them wander around, or that'll be the end of her and the chicks, because she's probably got eggs from different hens, but I could tell by the size of the of some of the eggs that either they were laid by a bantam or one of my naked necks, and the chicks are really, really small. So I'll keep you posted on that. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can get a shot of her under the stairs before she pecks at me and tells me, get out of here. Yeah, it's like, that's life on the farm. But anyway, guys, let's get on to the good part, which is who we have as a guest. This is the first time he's been on Stories of the Supernatural. His name is Eric Altman, and he hails from a small suburban town of Greensburg in southwestern Pennsylvania, 40 miles east of Pittsburgh. And he still lives in Pennsylvania. And he's had a lifelong interest in the strange and unusual. Yeah, right up our alley. He's a fan of horror and science fiction movies, and spent a good portion of his childhood watching films of this genre. He also, believe it or not, went to public libraries. Once upon a time, people used to do that, educating himself on the supernatural and the unusual. And of course, he read the books, magazines, and grew up watching shows like In Search of, The Outer Limits, The Twilight Zones, The Munsters, and The Addams Family on TV. God, I remember that. Then in 1980, he was inspired by 2 films that came out, which was The Legend of Boggy Creek and A Creature from Black Lake. And this is what prompted him to start studying the Bigfoot phenomenon. And from that point on, his focus in the paranormal turned over to Bigfoot, the abominable snowman, the Yowie, and other strange man-like creatures. And in 1983, he met his mentor, Stan Gordon, which, by the way, I've interviewed Stan before. He's great, at the Green Gate Mall in Greensburg at a UFO Bigfoot display. And he began to follow Stan's work very closely. And that was his mentor. He still works with him till this day. And of course, he went back and he started doing research through archived newspapers about Stan's work. And I remember this from when I interviewed Stan, as far as how many years he has experience as far as history of sightings and stories, etc. For 19 years, he researched and educated himself on Bigfoot, not only in that local area of Pennsylvania, but nationally and globally. Then he went on to attend the Bigfoot conference in Ohio, and he decided to start investigating with the Southwestern Pennsylvania Bigfoot Study Group, and became a volunteer field researcher for the Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. It's just the BFRO. And people have heard me before in other shows say, nothing replaces field work, whatever it is that you're investigating. And he stayed in that field. And in 2000, he was appointed the director of the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society, which he held that position until 2014. And he went off to do independent research. And in 2016, he founded, and he is a director of the Pennsylvania Cryptozoology Society, which the volunteers investigate strange animal and cryptid cases in Pennsylvania and the surrounding states. And he's been involved in assisting with a person investigating close to 300 cases in Pennsylvania and across the country. He's also traveled to other states investigating claims of Bigfoot sightings. And he's hosted 8 East Coast Bigfoot conferences. And he's co-hosted the 2011 Pittsburgh UFO Bigfoot Conference with the Pennsylvania chapter of MUFON. And he's currently the co-organizer and co-host of the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Camping Adventure. All right. So help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Eric?
I'm well, Marlene. How are you?
Good. Even though it was self-explanatory how you got involved with this, what was it? Even though, originally, like you said, you looked at the paranormal. What was it about the Bigfoot phenomena that drew you in particular for you to start following that field so closely?
Well, as you said, I was a fan of horror and science fiction movies, and I liked a lot of the classic B movies, especially ones that dealt with monsters and different urban legends and that. And I came across 2 films, as you mentioned, Creature from Black Lake, Legend of Boggy Creek. And The Legend of Boggy Creek is a docudrama filmed out of Fouke, Arkansas in the early 1970s. And it was, when I say docudrama, it's a documentary film, and they have dramatic reenactments or recreations of people who had sightings of supposed hair-covered creature that was roaming the swamps and bayous of the Fouke Boggy Creek area. And it kind of fit the genre I was interested in at the time. But here's the possibility that a monster really does exist. And I found that fascinating. So as a 10-year-old, I wanted to find it as much as I could. And I just started devouring anything I could on the subject, whether it be In Search of on TV, which I watched as a child, newspaper articles, books, magazines, anything I could find on the subject matter to see if there was really anything to it. And the more I studied, the more I learned that this wasn't just a phenomenon that was going on in one part of the country. This was a global phenomenon that's going on all around the world in different countries. And that was really fascinating to me, because as a 10-year-old, you're told by your parents there's no such thing as monsters. There's nothing scary that hides under your bed. Well, here's the real possibility that a monster does truly exist. And back in the 1960s and 70s, Bigfoot study was really in its infancy. It was just starting to become, it was a growing phenomenon, and more people were becoming involved with it. And here's the real possibility of some kind of hair-covered man-like creature that's roaming our forests and swamps and rural areas. And I just wanted to learn as much as I could about it. So I began to study and educate myself and try to find out if this really truly was a real legitimate phenomenon. And here I am almost, 41 years later, and I'm still studying it. I'm still investigating cases. And I'm probably about 80% convinced that the creature is real, that there is something to the phenomenon. I do believe that the phenomenon itself is real. People are seeing something, they're finding footprints, they're having experiences. And as I mentioned, it's a global phenomenon. It's not just delegated to one part of the country, or the Pacific Northwest, or the swamps of Florida. This is a global phenomenon. So there's something to it. It's been going on, and studying this, I've learned it's been going on now for hundreds of years. There's literature and documentation that goes well back into the 1700s, if not further. There's Native American tribes that talk about this phenomenon far before white men were here in the United States. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. It's a very complex phenomenon, and it's something that's always intrigued me, and that's why I'm still studying it today.
Right. And this is because, I interviewed back in 2017 Jim Smith with the Alabama Bigfoot Society. He's passed away since then. And he had been doing it for a long time. And he would tell me, he goes, in all these years, I had people come and tell me stories. And he even had at one point people that would have sightings, like they would be going down the road and they would see something that they would even call the police, and the police couldn't do anything about it. So the police, after a while, came and brought them over to his house. And he said, look, whatever it was that they saw, I don't know. But they believed what they saw, something that was Bigfoot. It wasn't like they were lying, they saw something that scared them, and something that they couldn't believe that they had seen.
Right.
So he says that, that you could say, well, there's some people that they're imaginative or they're lying. He says, but that leaves a whole swath of people that have actually either seen or heard or something that they can't make fit into all the rational explanations, including, he said, even people that are very familiar with the outdoors, like hunters, outdoorsmen, that they know, what are the sounds that you hear in the woods or the things that you're going to see. They themselves have experiences that they like, okay, this is not the cougar, the whatever type of animal is in that area, the bear. And they, and I've even heard that some of them even lose some of the deers that they've shot. They lose somehow or other the carcass ups and disappears. So that there's definitely something there. Absolutely. And like you said, even when Native Americans, this was before that you could say, okay, they were influenced by, whatever, seeing this. This was long before any of that. That there was no reason. They were just describing exactly something that was in that area. Do you think that, what do you think? Do you think that mostly that they're just really good at camouflaging themselves? Is that why sometimes they're just not seen as often? They're there. It's just that we don't see them.
I think there's a couple reasons why we don't have good documentation of them, film footage, video footage, camera footage. Why we don't experience them more often is, first and foremost, I think it's a very small population. I don't think there's tens of thousands of these things around the world. I think it's a very small population. I couldn't even begin to guess how many, but it's a rare animal. And if it is in an area, it is probably a small family unit in that area, and that's it. They're not behind every tree. They're not behind every bush. Every time you go out in the woods, you're not going to see a Bigfoot. It's a very small population. Secondly, I think they do camouflage themselves very well in the woods. It is their home, and that's what they're well adapted to. So being a brown, a black, a dark gray colored animal, they blend into their surroundings very well. And they're familiar with their surroundings. So they know how to stand perfectly still and look like trees, or hide well enough in a bush that you don't see them as you walk by, or remain quiet and stealthy enough that you don't hear them unless they want you to hear them. So I think that, when you do have an encounter, it's a chance encounter. It's a chance sighting that's mostly accidental. It's not on purpose. And I think they're just masters of their own domain. They camouflage themselves and hide very, very well. And that's why we don't have the excellent footage, the game camera photos. I get that asked all the time. We have thousands and thousands of game camera photos that are out there. Why haven't we caught a picture of one of them? I think they know the cameras are there, and they just
They're
avoid
intelligent
them.
enough to know what it is.
Yeah, it's like putting a TV set out in the woods. In your own home, if something's out of place in your home and something just appears, you're going to know it's there.
Exactly.
So I mean, they probably know these cameras are there. I know bears are able to smell the petroleum in game cameras, and that's why they chew them off of trees and rip them down. They try to get into that game camera, and they probably emit either an odor or a sound from the equipment, or even the infrared lights that some of them give off to take pictures at night. The creatures, I have no doubt, know that they're there, and that's why they avoid the game cameras. That's why we don't get good pictures of them.
Right. Have you ever seen one? Have you ever had the chance to see something?
I've had multiple very strange encounters in the forest. I can't say we're definitively Bigfoot, but they're not common wildlife. They're not people. I can't say what they were, and I've never seen a Bigfoot just step out of the trees that I can say, yes, that was a Bigfoot. I've seen fleeting glimpses of things that I just don't know what they are. Eye shine. I had an experience in Ohio back in 2008 where I thought I saw something large stand up from behind this 4-foot high brush line. And I saw the form in my high beams of my vehicle for just a split second, but I couldn't tell you what it was. It just looked like something that stood up. I've never seen one clear enough to definitively say, yes, that's a Sasquatch, or yes, that's a Bigfoot. But I've had multiple experiences and encounters, whether they be audible encounters, hearing something, seeing eye shine that's so high up off the ground that it doesn't fit your deer, your bear, a person, and just having some weird experiences in the forest that really make you scratch your head and think, yeah, there's something going on out here, but not definitively.
Because and that's the thing, that some of the times, like you say, when I made, I've heard of stories of people that are very familiar with, let's say, that area, and they know all the animals that exist out there and what they look like, or what you said, at that height, that what else could it be? It kind of eliminates a lot of your possible animals that are in that vicinity. And then, like you said, and I've also heard that some of the, how can I say, the calls that they make, that after a while, people that have studied them, they say there's no other animal that sounds like this. Almost like the vocalizations cannot be made by the known animals in that area.
Yeah, a lot of the audible reports that I get, I talk to eyewitnesses, they often describe it as something with a very large lung capacity. They're feeling it in their body that a bear or deer is not going to emit that powerful of a sound. So it has a really large lung capacity to make that kind of sound, to project that kind of sound. And with advances in technology now, we can see the spectral range of these recordings. If we capture something on audio, we can look at that spectral range, compare it to other known animals, and see if it falls in that spectral range. And if it's well below that, then we can say, okay, that's definitely not a deer or a bear or whatever. It's something different.
Right. Like, exactly. Like, that's what I'm saying, that especially with, like you said, that nowadays they have technology where they could say, they feed it into some type of program. And they could say, all right, besides the knowledge, let's say this is not a wolf or an owl or a cougar or whatever's that indigenous to that area as far as wildlife.
Right.
I have heard a couple of recordings myself, that I've heard, and I was like, if I heard that and I was in the woods, I'd be like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go looking for it. How's that? Not that it was scary, but you could tell
like that. Yeah, I've heard things like that in the forest myself that really make you pause and just kind of look at your research partner and say, what the hell was that? One example, just this happened this past year. We were hiking on a trail at night, and we heard what sounded like giant owls. And we know there's no such thing as a giant owl. But something in the woods was very loud and very powerful sounding, making that hoot sound. And it wasn't a barred owl. It wasn't a barn owl. It wasn't anything we're familiar with. It was very loud, and it was very close. And we took pause and looked at each other like, man, that's the biggest freaking owl I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's like, do I really? And for all we know, maybe they do have the power of mimicry, where they've learned how to mimic other other types of animals. But of course, like you said, with the lung capacity, when they do the mimic, it sounds like, man, how big is that animal that's doing that?
Yep.
So I've also heard the theory that do you think that there's any danger that they're, like you said, they're rarer, that they don't have, in other words, that their numbers are shrinking because they don't have, how can I say it, enough other Bigfoot to basically mate and reproduce and replace the ones that are dying?
Yeah, I think there's a very good possibility that their numbers are dwindling and the population is shrinking. If there were more of these things, we would definitely have more definitive proof than what we have right now. That's why I really strongly believe that the population is in a great amount. It's a smaller number of creatures that are out there. And with the smaller number of creatures out there, obviously they don't have the breeding capacity or numbers to continue their species. So we may be looking at a species that eventually dies out and goes extinct because of such a low number. But unfortunately, I'm not a scientist, so I can't answer that as far as technical terms or scientific terms. But just in my opinion, I think that the low number of these animals eventually, unless they're able to continue to breed, and there's so many theories on that itself, unless they're able to continue to breed, eventually the population is going to die out.
And you hear about all these different versions of Bigfoot in different parts of the country. They get like their own name, and some of them they look different. Some are bigger, some are more aggressive, some are smaller. And what do you think that is? That they've basically stayed in that one area and developed these characteristics, let's say, for that environment.
Exactly. I think there's so many little small towns that have their own name for these creatures, whether it be Nobby out of North Carolina, the swamp ape, or the skunk ape out of Florida. Yeah. There's so many different names, and the Native Americans had over 200 names for these creatures. There was 200 different tribes that had names for them. So I think it's an environmental reason, and I also think it's a geographic location and what's in that area, what food sources are there, the type of people that live in that area, if there's encroachment going on, if there's destabilization of the environment where they're tearing down trees, building more and more homes. There's a lot of things that play a factor into these animals, whether it be their size, their aggressiveness, their demeanor. I think there's a lot of factors that contribute to that. And like here in Pennsylvania, they're thought to be thinner, more lanky, if you will, wiry description of the creatures. And they're not like 12 to 15 feet in height. They're usually 6 to 7 feet, maybe 8 at most. And as I said, they're not really aggressive, but they're very thin. And I think the reason why, just in my opinion, why they're thinner than, let's say, like the Pacific Northwest, is you have a different environment. Here you have some mountainous terrain, but not like you do in the Pacific Northwest, where you have thousands upon thousands of acres of forest and a vast food source and water source, where you don't have that same environment here in Pittsburgh. It's Pennsylvania. It's a different environment altogether. And I think that food source is smaller, therefore they don't get the abundance of food as they do like the Pacific Northwest or in Texas or Louisiana in the swamps, where they have a completely different environment and they have a different food source down there. So I think it does really contribute to where they're at, where they're at in the country and the environment that they're in, the people that live there. I think a lot of that plays factors into the type, size, aggression, what you call it, of the creature.
Right. And because I tell everybody, people don't realize, I go, whether he's 7 feet or 15 or 8, I go, do you understand the amount of food that an animal, when I say animal, whether it's a human, you have to caloric intake to sustain that body mass. As far as, and sometimes, because I want to say, a lot of people get into this, trying to get into inside the head of a Bigfoot. I'm thinking something as big as that probably spends the majority of its day feeding itself, or in other words, searching for food or hunting, if that's what it needs to do, just because it needs it to maintain itself, whether it's the body warmth, the temperature, whatever.
Yep.
And like you said, I think that every once in a while, like with hunters, maybe it'll follow hunters because maybe it's an older member or sick and they know, hey, I can get one of their deer. In other words, like you said, they know when the hunters are in the area, they're going to bring down some type of prey that maybe,
Yep.
I did something to my foot and I can't chase that deer anymore.
Right.
I think that sometimes it's mostly their pursuit for themselves, not because I think they try to avoid us as much as possible unless they're forced into some situation. Do you think that Bigfoot are just that? When I say animals, I want to use animals as whether people say they're some type of primate offshoot. Do you think they're just strictly physical animals?
That's a tough question to answer.
Right.
And the reason I say that is when I first got into this many, many years ago, that was my line of thinking, was that this was an undiscovered primate and solely that. It was just something that wasn't discovered yet, something off the evolutionary chain that's evolved, but not completely into the human, the Homo sapien range of primates, but somewhere in between, like a missing link, if you will. And I thought of it nothing more than an animal. But the longer I've been in this and find and interview more people and find more information about it, I'm not sure it is just a primate. I've talked to people that have seen this thing pretty close, and they describe it more having more human characteristics and human description, looking more like a feral human, if you will, rather than an ape.
Right.
So at this point, it's hard to say. It really is. It's hard to say what this thing is. And until we have a live specimen captured or a dead specimen that can be studied and have an autopsy done and studied that way, we just really won't know. But I'm not sure.
Right. And I know what you're saying, that's at the best it's speculation based on eyewitness accounts.
Yeah.
What do you think of reports of that there's UFO sightings coincide with an uptick of Bigfoot or cryptid sightings? Do you think there's any validity to that? I mean, I've heard of that, and I don't know if it's just chance.
I think there's some kind of connection. I don't know what it is.
All right.
And the reason I say that is because, especially here in Pennsylvania, we have a long history of these creatures being seen at the same time as a UFO sighting has taken place, or shortly before or after. One or the other have happened. There have been multiple sightings, especially in the 1970s. I'm sure Stan talked about that when he was on your show, that there were a number of sightings where there was a UFO sighted either at the same time as a Bigfoot was sighted and the eyewitness experienced both, or there was UFOs sighted a few days before in the general area, and then a few days after the Bigfoot was reportedly seen. I think the whole paranormal in some way or another is all connected somehow. I haven't figured that out, and I don't think I'll ever be able to figure that out. But
right.
Kind of connection there. And one of the things Bigfoot stuff, I think, yes, it's some way connected.
Right. And one of the things that Stan, I guess, because when you track stuff for so long is when you're actually able to see a pattern, or we've got all these UFO sightings, and look at this in that same area. It might be a couple 100 miles in diameter, but I'm saying we also have a surge in Bigfoot sightings. And if you see that happen more than once, then you're thinking, okay, is there correlation between one and the other? And I guess that's why I asked you, because I've heard also other theories. Are these Bigfoot, if not all of them, some of them, are they coming in through interdimensional rips? Is that why we can never find them? Is that why we can't come across? Or is that just strictly just two parallel things, but they don't meet? This is going on the supposition that you have interdimensional travels from UFOs.
Right. Well, along with the UFO and Bigfoot thing, there are people that have claimed that they've seen a Bigfoot materialize and disappear right in front of them. And I'm not talking just step behind a tree and hide. I'm talking physically it was there, and then it just kind of just disappears. And they relate that to possibly an interdimensional travel. And there's a lot of experienced researchers who are now coming forward and throwing that possibility out there. I don't think I can do that yet, simply because we don't know anything about interdimensional travel. It's all speculation. It's all hypothesis. It's all guessing and presumption. So I can't say that Bigfoot is an interdimensional being or not. But I've talked to people, and I've talked to quite a number of people over the years that claim they've seen a Bigfoot walk in front of their car, and they could see plain as day with the high beams on it. And it just, 1 second it's there, and the next second it's gone. And it didn't continue across the road. It was just there and gone.
Right.
And
that's a pretty big animal. That's a pretty big thing.
Yeah. Is it possible that Bigfoot has some kind of pheromone that it puts off to maybe confuse our senses, or ultrasound that puts off a very low based, low decibel sound like tigers do? They do that to stun their prey. Is it doing something like that to maybe confuse our senses where we just don't see it anymore? I don't know. Again, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know what this animal is capable of doing or not capable of doing. But I hear stories from people all the time and talk with other researchers from around the country who share the similar stories. As a researcher, I have to remain open-minded. I'm skeptical and I'm very cynical about a lot of what I hear and a lot of what I investigate, but I have to keep that open mind, and I have to explore all possibilities. I can't just throw it out because I don't personally believe that's happening. So I have to look into it to see if there's anything to it. And in some cases, I found maybe there is something weird going on here that just can't be explained by modern science. The UFO Bigfoot connection, I think there's some kind of connection going on there, but is it does it encompass the whole Bigfoot and UFO phenomenon? I don't think so. I think it happens in a very small percentage of cases. And there are cases that do, like I mentioned, they do tie the two in together somehow in some way or fashion, but not enough, in my opinion, to say it's encompassing the whole phenomenon. I think people are seeing something, they're experiencing something, they report it, I investigate it and try to get to the bottom of to see what the real answer is.
Right, because that's how you basically like, again, short of an actual carcass, everything is just speculation based on eyewitness, and of course, what's the quality of the witness? In other words, as far as it mentions in your bio that you've also investigated into cryptids.
Mm-hmm.
What's up there in Pennsylvania, in your area? What cryptids are cited?
We have a couple different strange creatures that have been reported and seen over the years, and some of them are a little far-fetched in my opinion, that I don't see how they could physically exist, but we've had reports of upright walking canines. They call them the dog man. Yeah.
Okay.
And they're becoming more and more popular, if you will, amongst some researchers as far as getting the word out there and investigating cases and claims. I have never investigated. I'll take it back. I have one case I investigated as far as a dogman report is concerned. And I wasn't able, unfortunately, to meet with the eyewitness to go to the exact location to see if there was any validity to it. But I've only ever had one case presented to me about the dogman phenomenon. Others, they have them dropped in their laps all the time. But the dogman is something that's becoming more popular in Pennsylvania. The Thunderbird phenomenon has been an ongoing phenomenon in Pennsylvania for quite some time. And what the Thunderbird phenomenon is a large bird that's described as two different types of birds, but they're lumped in the same category. The first type of description is like a pterodon or pterodactyl type of bird, a leathery membrane or a reptilian membrane around the body, very large wingspan, anywhere from 8 to 20 feet in length, large talons, a large beak, and a pointed crest, like not a sagittal crest, but a point on the top of its head, much like a pterodon or pterodactyl.
But no feathers.
No feathers. It's completely featherless and usually black in color. The other bird that's reported is a bird that does have feathers. They're usually black or dark gray in color. Some of them have a white ring around its neck, a very large beak, large talons, and a wingspan of anywhere from, again, 8 to 20 feet in length, and a very, very massive sized bird. We get those reports quite frequently, and throughout the state. It's not common in one particular area. We get them. I think the last couple of reports that came in were this past, I want to say, August, September.
Okay.
We've got reports in Pennsylvania, people seeing them from their cars or outside walking a dog and happen to look up and see this enormous bird fly over. That happens not as frequent as the Bigfoot sighting reports come in, but it does happen quite frequently. Those are the two main cryptids we get reports on here in Pennsylvania, aside from Bigfoot. Occasionally we'll get a giant snake reported, anywhere from 12 to 20 feet in length, very large. I remember reading a report from the 1960s, I want to say, of a very large snake that was as large as a stovepipe coming out of a cabin. They compared it to.
Wow.
So occasionally we'll get the large or giant snake reports. And I think aside from that, we get some really strange reports that don't fit into the realm of cryptids. We had one back in 2012 of a giant walking gargoyle-like creature with large wings on its back. Yeah, it crossed the road in front of a car, and somebody watched it walk under a road sign that was 8 feet in height. And it just didn't have to stoop down. It just literally walked right underneath it. So it was pretty tall. I think it was about 7.5, 8 feet, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, we get the really one-off shoot cryptids occasionally too. Pennsylvania is a very strange state altogether. There's some weird stuff that happens up here.
Let me ask you, this is a little bit on the offside because I did an article on this. I don't know if you're in that area, that back in the 60s, I think it was, that there was a guy that they called the Green Man. That later turned out, people would talk about seeing him on the road, and later turned out that he was a real guy that had a really disfiguring accident. And he turned out to be a nice man. He just had been disfigured because he had a childhood accident. But when
you're right, that actually happened in a suburb outside of Pittsburgh. I believe in Beaver County, and he had a deformed face, and the urban legend and myth grew around him being the Green Man. And there was stories about him living in a tunnel, and he actually glowed green. It wasn't the truth at all. He was actually a really nice guy, just had a deformity of the face, and I think he had some kind of electrical accident. I don't know the whole story on it, but he was a real person, and he wasn't an urban legend or myth or a scary monster or anything like that. But it's amazing how stories can start out with truth to them and get twisted and turned over time to become something completely different that they never were in the first place.
And the reason why I asked you about that interdimensional travel is that, or whether we want to call it interdimensional pockets, if not travel per se. So some people say, well, this is the reason why even historically you'll have reports of these weird creatures, like you said, and a bunch of people see them and then it stops. All right. Like everybody sees them, and then the sightings stop, and they say, and a lot of the witnesses are credible people, and they're saying, okay, the reason, like, in other words, it came in through a rip, and it was able to leave, and then it was sighted, and then that was the end of the sightings. And how can I say it? You know how Mothman has that reputation of being either something bad's going to happen or something.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of these cryptids, there's no hidden meaning, behind seeing them. You just see them, get wigged out, of course.
Yeah, and then they're gone.
And then that's it.
Yep. And that's happened here in Southwestern Pennsylvania. We have an area that's notorious in the region. It's called the Chestnut Ridge. And it's an area that runs, it's a furthest western mountain ridge of the Allegheny Mountains, the furthest western side of the Appalachian Mountains here in Pennsylvania. It runs through 4 counties and into the northwestern West Virginia.
All right.
And there's a long history of all kinds of phenomenon that goes on up there, from hauntings, haunted locations, UFOs, strange lights in the forest, various anomalies from cryptids to strange creatures. There's just so much phenomenon that goes on. It's become legendary in this area, and it's just, one reporter actually called it in the 1980s. He wrote a newspaper article and he called it the Twilight Zone of Pennsylvania. Just so much strange stuff happens here, and I live right in the foothills of it, so I do a lot of my research there. But we get all kinds of weird phenomena, not just Bigfoot reports, not just Thunderbird reports. I mentioned the gargoyle sighting.
That's wow,
crazy. And Stan Gordon had documented in one of his books about a dragon that was reportedly seen flying over a guy walking his dog back in, I believe it was the early, I want to say the late 2000s, maybe 2014, 15, somewhere in that time frame. But he claims he saw a dragon. He saw it well enough. It was at dusk. He saw outside pole lamp, and it lit up the area. He saw it well enough that he said it wasn't a bird. It wasn't a plane. He could see the talons. He could see the leathery skin on it. It wasn't like a thunderbird. It was a dragon. And we get these weird reports all the time. I talked to Stan. You mentioned he was my mentor. I still work with Stan today. I talk to him probably once or twice a week on the phone, and he relays cases to me that he's gotten. Credible eyewitnesses, police officers, law enforcement officers who see a shadowy humanoid figure cross the road in front of their vehicle that you can barely make out a form, but it's there. And it doesn't have any facial features. It doesn't have any distinct features, no clothing on it, nothing you can see, but a form that looks like a human cross the road in front of a vehicle and disappear. Just weird stuff like that happens in this Chestnut Ridge area all the time. I've experienced stuff. My research partners have experienced stuff. There's no rhyme, no reason for it. We don't know why this area is notorious for the sightings, but they go on for a long, long period of time, and then they stop. They'll completely stop. We'll have a flap, if you will, of Bigfoot sightings that go on for a year or two, and then it goes deadly quiet, and we don't have any Bigfoot reports.
Right, like it's on a cycle or something that's going on that drives the behavior or whatever.
The UFO reports are constant. They're all year round. They happen all year round, and hundreds, if not thousands, of people have seen stuff in the skies. So that's a constant. But the cryptids, that's a cyclical thing where it happens, it goes away, it happens, it goes away, and we get those one-offs. Like I mentioned, the gargoyle. That I believe that was seen a couple of times by different people, but ever since that little burst of reports came out, nothing since. The dragon was a one and done. I don't think.
I bet he never went to walk his dog at twilight again.
Yeah, I wouldn't be walking my dog at twilight if I saw a dragon outside. I'd be like, the dog can go in the bathroom in my house.
Yeah, I'd be like, all right, sorry, boy, but
yeah.
Let me ask you something, Eric. Have you ever had, I don't want to say something follow you home, but have you ever had any investigations and all of a sudden you started having, is that your cat?
That's my cat. He's a big mouth. Sorry.
Oh, don't worry. I have 9 dogs. I have a lot of animals. I get it. Did you ever have stuff that after an investigation, things started happening in your house, weird stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole different can of worms.
I know.
I don't know. We bought a house in 2017, my wife and I, and we moved in. And once we moved in, weird stuff started happening, and a lot of activity happened for probably about 4 years, and then for no reason it just stopped. And I'm not a paranormal investigator. Well, I have my own ghost group. I do go on paranormal investigations with other teams. I'm a member of several groups that I go out and investigate with them, but I'm not a paranormal investigator per se. My thing is cryptids and with speciality in looking into Bigfoot phenomenon. So I've gone to paranormal investigations. I've gone to haunted locations, many haunted locations. I can't say if something followed me home or not, but it's really weird how we moved into the house and then things started happening, and it was so active in our house for 4 years. We had cabinets ripped off the wall.
What?
Yes, we had a kitchen.
Oh my God! Wait! Back up. I mean, I've been doing paranormal investigations since the 1990s, so that's why I'm saying that's on the scale of manifestation. That's like way out there. Did you know the history on the house at all?
I was doing research on the house to find out if there was any history on it, and we found out the house was built in 1973. We live in a normal neighborhood housing plan. There's nothing special about this neighborhood. Nobody died in the house. The couple that moved into the house in 73 when the house was built was the only couple that lived here, and they lived here for 40 years before they sold it to us and moved out. They didn't tell us anything weird that happened in the house. We didn't get any weird vibes in the house when we were looking at it, or checking out the rooms, or I mean, this was our dream house. It was perfect for my family. So I never found anything out about the house that's strange or unusual.
And you can say, wow, I wish I'd known about this.
Yeah. I mean, nothing jumped out at me. We've had, if I remember correctly, I'm trying to think, 1, 2, 3, 4 different psychic mediums in the house to conduct readings and investigations. I've had 5 different paranormal groups in my house to conduct investigation. It was that active.
And what did they tell you?
Different things, actually, which was kind of surprising.
I was going to say, did any of them agree on anything, or
no.
that you were like, oh, and that, and then, okay.
No. And one paranormal group told me there was a ghost of a little girl that didn't like me. And that was why she was so aggressively pounding on the walls and slamming doors and turning TVs on, and why she ripped the kitchen cabinet off the wall and dropped it in the middle of the kitchen floor.
Some little girl.
Yeah, we had another one tell us that someone died in the neighborhood and their spirit was haunting our house. So we had so many different reasons why our house was haunted. It's difficult to tell who was accurate and who wasn't. With not finding anything in the history, maybe they were all wrong. I don't know. The last person we had in here was a sensitive clairvoyant, and she did a blessing and a cleansing on the house and on the property. And after that, we haven't had anything to that scale of activity in the house. But it started with knocking on the wall at 3 o'clock in the morning, where something would knock and wake me up. The first major thing that happened that really convinced me something was going on was I'm a light sleeper, and I hear a lot of noises that wake me up. And I heard what I thought was my son get up from his bedroom, and our bedroom is right next door to his. The 2 doors almost connect. I heard his door open and shut. I heard somebody walking down the hall. And when I heard his door shut, I woke up and I yelled out to him. I said, "Is that you?" And I got no answer. And he usually answers, say, "Yeah, it's me, Dad," or I'm going down the basement, whatever. And I heard this person walk down the hallway, turn the corner, and go down the steps. And we live in a split level ranch. So there's 2 sections, 2 set of stairs. One goes down to the landing of the front door and then down to our finished basement where I'm at right now. And I heard somebody walk down the steps and go down into our garage. I heard a garage door open and shut. And I was thinking, oh my God, somebody's in our house. So I jumped out of bed and made a beeline down to the basement. And when I walked into the finished basement, all the lights were off. The garage door was shut. I was not hearing any sounds. So I went into the garage. When I opened the garage door, the lights in the garage were out. I turned them on and I pulled the garage door shut behind me, and I checked around the garage. There's nobody in the garage. I thought that's really weird. When I turned around to come back into the finished basement, all the lights in the finished basement were on, and I had not turned them on. So I stood there just puzzled for a few minutes thinking, okay, I see this stuff on TV. I see these people talk about this stuff happening, and I've never had this stuff happen to me before.
And this is not my imagination, because
what's going on here? And from there, it escalated into banging on the wall, doors slamming shut, TVs coming on and off, not just one TV in the house, multiple TVs coming on and off. We have an electric fireplace here in the basement that has come on by itself. Our dogs would bark at nothing. They'd be staring down the hallway, growling and barking, but there's nothing there. The footsteps, so much stuff happened. October of 2019, about 2:30 in the morning, I'm sound asleep. My wife's sound asleep. And as I said, I'm a light sleeper. And I hear this huge crash. And I sat up in bed and looked at my wife. And the first thing we thought was, okay, the cat's knocked something off the table or knocked a chair over or something. My wife got out of bed, walked down the hallway into the kitchen. I heard her say, "Oh, bleep." My son got up because he heard it. He went in the kitchen. He saw it. He went, "Oh, bleep." And I thought, well, I better get up and go look. So I walked to the kitchen and I said, "Oh, bleep." And what had happened is we had a 2-door cupboard that was solidly attached to the wall get ripped off the wall and dropped in the middle of the kitchen floor and shattered into pieces. And I looked at the wall, and the nails and the screws that were holding that cabinet in place were still in the wall. So something pulled that cabinet off the wall with great
I was going to
force.
say, yeah. Sometimes you'll see that they're still attached to the thing and they ripped out of the wall, but they're attached to the furniture.
Yeah.
But you're saying
there was no nails in that cupboard. They were all they were still all attached to the wall. So that kind of freaked us out a little bit, thinking, man, whatever's here has, if it is a spirit or whatever's here that isn't happy, for starters, and it has that much energy and force to be able to rip a cabinet off the wall.
Yeah. Yes.
Something happened shortly after that kind of convinced me that we definitely had something paranormal going on in our house, and that's why we got the teams in here to investigate. I bought a riding lawnmower, a riding tractor, and I kept it in our garage for storage. And I had bought a bag catcher for the back of it, and it has this pretty heavy bar that holds the bag catcher in place. And it wasn't attached to the riding mower yet. It was sitting on my bench, which was on the opposite side of my son's car. And the riding lawnmower was on the back side of my son's car. And while sleeping one night, I heard a huge crash in the basement. And I got up and came down thinking, oh, here we go again. Open the garage door, go in there, lights are off, nobody's in the garage door, and started looking around, and here that grass catching bag bar left my bench and was thrown over my son's car and was on the floor behind his car, a good 7, 8 feet, 10 feet. And I hadn't touched it. My son hadn't touched it. So something picked it up and moved it pretty far.
How much force it needs, how much psychic force?
Yeah, a lot.
Needs to that's a lot, quite a lot. And that's let me ask you, just out of curiosity, that last sensor that you said that after she did the blessing, did she ever tell you what she thought it was?
She's the one that thought that someone in the neighborhood committed suicide and had died and was in close proximity to our house and was kind of moving in and out of our house.
Okay.
She did a sage cleansing on the house, a blessing on the house, and then a blessing on the property outside. And since she did that last year, we haven't had a lot of very much activity, if anything, happen. It's been really quiet. But for those good 4 years, from 2017 up into probably the beginning of 2021, it was active. I mean, stuff was happening almost on a daily basis. And it wasn't scary stuff. I wasn't scared of it. My wife, it was more annoying to her. And to me, it was fascinating. I wanted to find out what exactly was causing it and what was going on here. There were a couple times that really concerned me when I heard my son in the garage yell out like he hurt himself, like whether he cut himself or what it was. I heard him yell out like he was in pain. And I rushed into the garage looking for him, and I was yelling all through the house, "Where are you?" He's sitting out back on the back porch swing. He was talking to his girlfriend on the phone. And I'm like, "Did you just scream?" And he said, "No." I said, "Did you get hurt?" "No." Well, something in the garage sounded exactly like you, that sounded like you got hurt really bad. And it wasn't him. He was out back and didn't make a peep. So when something starts mimicking your family.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, that's not a residual haunting. That's an intelligent haunting. Yeah, that's not like something concerning.
So to answer your question about if something followed me home, I don't know.
And you know what? The reason why I ask this is that I've heard, a lot of people, you hear about these paranormal investigators that they go on a paranormal thing and then something follows them home, and you still could get, the reason why I say you could be doing an investigation into, how can I say it, a cryptid case. Mm-hmm. Or the reason why I say this, I used to attend some meetings for the UFO awareness, whatever. And I remember a lot of times I spoke to some of the people that would tell me that they had UFO sightings, and then they started having paranormal activity in their house. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't understand why. It was like one thing they would, you know how people talk like, have you ever heard of this? I remember seeing, and sometimes it wasn't even, it was just a sighting, not a UFO, no ET, no abduction, nothing like that.
Right.
And then after that, they start having weird stuff going on in their house. And they're like, it was more than one person.
And that's why I mentioned earlier that I think maybe there is some kind of connection between all the phenomenon.
Right. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Skinwalker Ranch phenomena out in Utah.
Yeah.
Where you're thinking, okay, here you have these sightings of all these cryptids, weird stuff, God knows, dire wolves. I mean, and then you hear that the family that used to live there, what was it, the Shermans, were having all these paranormal experiences inside their house.
Right. Yep.
So you're thinking, so what is it? Are we talking here cryptid, UFO, ET thing, but then they were having really weird stuff going on in the house.
Yeah.
So
there's a pretty famous quote out there, and I can't remember who said it, but it goes something along the lines that the more you stare into the abyss, eventually the abyss starts to stare back at you.
yes, it does.
So
Yes,
yeah,
it does.
I think the longer you investigate paranormal claims and paranormal phenomenon and cryptids, eventually you're going to draw the attention of something, and you may not like the results. I mean, I wasn't purposefully looking for something to follow me home, but if it did follow me home, it let me know it was here for a while, and then after the cleansing, we haven't had any problems. But for a good 4 years, it was pretty intense in this house.
Well, and like you said, the couple that lived there, and obviously they were alive when they sold it, and they didn't mention. And you can say, well, but it would be hard to overlook a phenomena of that at that level. This was not like, oh, every once in a while, you'll hear a door close, or you'll hear steps, or the toilet will flush. Something that's. But what you're describing is way out there. Oh, way out there.
It was so intense. It was just. I started writing a journal of everything that was going on. I kept track for about 4 months, and I had like 8 pages of stuff that happened almost on a daily basis. And whether it would be footsteps or knocking or the TV coming on or the door slamming shut, something was always happening. And it got to the point where we were just getting kind of used to it. We were like, what's going to happen today? And kind of expecting something to happen. It wasn't scary or terrifying. I mean, we didn't see any scary dark shadows in the house or anything ominous. It didn't feel oppressive. It didn't feel like there was anything scary. We had a couple of those WTF moments, like when the cupboard came off in the kitchen and that lawnmower bar. I mean, there's a big metal heavy bar that sat on the back of the riding lawnmower, and that was moved. A couple of moments like that were like, wow. Or hearing my son in the garage and he's clearly not in the garage. Those kind of things are they make you kind of raise your eyebrows a little bit and like, wow.
Did you have the phenomena in the entire house, or was it restricted just to certain areas?
No, it was the entire house.
Everywhere.
Yeah. When it first started, it seemed like it was just the knocking upstairs in our bedroom, and it would be 3 distinct knocks. I mean, even to the point where my wife would sit up in bed and she'd nudge me and go, "Did you hear that?" And I'm laying there hoping that she heard it so I wasn't going insane. And she'd be like, "Did you hear that?" I'm like, "Yep, I heard it." Or I asked my son, "Did you hear that?" And he heard something. That was the beginning of it when we heard the knocking, and that went on for weeks, and then it kind of intensified from there. Yep. Yeah, it really ramped up.
That is incredible. But yeah, it's very possible that what she told you is accurate. I have heard of, because, sometimes a lot of people think, like, when they look at, the phenomenon of a haunting or something, they always look at, well, it had to have happened on this property or in this house. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you will have that. I mean, I've done cases where there's been an accident at an intersection close by. And for some reason, somebody in the neighborhood picks it up. I had another one where there was a child got hit by a car in that neighborhood, and the kid went over to their house because he used to live there, and they moved out of state. They moved down here to Florida, and they started having all this phenomena go on. Basically, what it turned out was this child that had gotten, you would think, well, why wouldn't the kid go home if that was a case of a haunting? It's because the kid would play with their kids.
Right.
Makes sense. So sometimes, you get where it doesn't necessarily have to have happened right on that property, if that was the case.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sounds very possible. But you know what? I know that everything has died down, but to be perfectly honest with you, that degree of force sounds like something that's non-human. That's my experience of stuff like that. Whether an elemental spirit or something, but
we had one of the mediums that came in here. When she was standing in the garage, her and her husband, she said to me, there's 2 entities here in the house. One is a fatherly figure, and she described my late father-in-law almost to a T. And my
Okay.
wife started tearing up because she was describing, she said, he's protecting you from what's darker in this house. And there's something
Right.
here, you haven't seen it yet. And it hasn't really made its presence known, but it's waiting and it's biding its time. But that other spirit's protecting you and keeping you safe from what this thing really wants to do. And again, we didn't have anything malevolent happen. It never felt
Right.
oppressive. I never felt fear for my family, except for those really off the moment couple things that happened. I was a little concerned, but I never felt like there was anything dark or malevolent in the house, just in my opinion. But she did tell us that. So who knows? Right. I really don't know. But whatever was here, in my opinion, was strong enough to rip a cover,
That's what I'm
cover
saying,
off the wall and throw a metal bar across the room, and to be able to turn TVs on, slam doors shut, and kick on our electric fireplace here in the basement. That takes some energy.
Psychic.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Yes,
but
it does.
Fortunately, it died down, and hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah. Let me ask you, right before, and I know you might not remember at this point because who knows. Right before you moved into the house, because you're telling me basically the triggering event was once you moved into this house that you had you been doing any type of investigations in a rural setting outside of the city or anything like that?
Just my Bigfoot stuff, and that's usually done in either the Chestnut Ridge or in rural settings, forests and stuff like that. But I wasn't doing any paranormal research at that time. No.
The reason why I say is that I wouldn't be surprised if maybe what you had in there was an elemental spirit, which is that's able to exhibit that amount of force. By the way, just so on an aside, I was a practicing hypnotist for many years, a hypnotherapist. Believe it or not, throughout the years, I did have a couple of people contact me because they had seen a cryptid, and they wanted to forget. They weren't able to sleep. They were a wreck.
Right.
And they ended up calling me or contacting me because one of them was, he basically was, had problems sleeping. He was walking around like wigged out. Another one wanted me to make him forget the event of what he had seen crossing the road.
Sure.
Because it's surprising. And these were things that were spaced out between years. Another one was an experience he saw when he went with his son hunting, where these people, they can't make, in other words, once they see this, and by talking to them, you could tell these are rational people, that they try so hard to make it fit into something and they can't. And then it's like their whole world kind of goes sideways.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, if this is possible, what else out there that supposedly doesn't exist or is just the subject of a sci-fi movie, does that exist too? And for some people, it's really, really hard. That it affects them. A lot of stuff that they took for granted that they would normally not be afraid of. It changes them profoundly. I'll tell you that much.
I've seen it too. Yeah.
I don't know if you've run across that.
Yeah, I've seen it change people traumatically. I mean, to them, it's not supposed to exist, and then they see it and they experience it. And I mean, what we're told in going to school and by our parents, like I said, monsters aren't supposed to exist.
Yes.
It's under your bed. It's a story to scare you and to keep you behaved and keep you in bed at night. Don't go in the woods at night. The boogeyman will get you. Well, it's to keep kids safe. Now, these are stories that we're told, but I think people are kind of shocked when they find out that maybe there really is a boogeyman or there is some kind of monster hiding in your closet. Or under your bed.
Especially if you're an adult.
Yeah.
And
so it changes their world profoundly.
Yes, it does.
I have people that still, I've seen the spectrum of it, the opposite spectrum of it, where people have had a sighting or an encounter and they become so engulfed and so obsessed with it, they want to go looking for it again, and they become researchers and start trying to learn more about it. And the opposite side of things, they never want to talk about it again. They clam up.
Yeah.
They have a mental block on it. In your case, they want to forget. I've seen both ends of the spectrum on it.
They want to go. I want to be the person I was before I saw that.
Yeah.
Basically, is what they want. I want to live that ignorance is bliss thing that I had going on, which I didn't know how blissful it was. And, basically you can't do that. There's other ways to address it with hypnosis. But yeah, I had people when they talk to me where to them, especially as an adult, and I want to say it, especially for men, it was like, I can't stand being this fearful. I can't. And I don't know how to not feel that way again, unless I, like you said, block it out or forget it.
Mm-hmm.
And, people that know, I don't lie to myself. I know what I saw. So
yeah. Yep.
And I'm sure you've, like you said, you run across it where, they don't, how's this? They don't ever want to be in a situation where they will ever again have that experience. Contrary to the ones that run off and want to do Bigfoot knockings and find Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Which, one last question. Do you think that that's intelligent, or if we don't know exactly what we're communicating to a Bigfoot, should people be a little bit more cautious with that?
I do it, and I throw caution in the wind when it comes to that, because I don't know what we're saying. I mean, the wood knocking, who knows what it means? There's speculation. Right. We could be communicating, saying, hello, we're here. It could be a warning sign. Who knows what it could be? The calls that people do, they do the whoop calls, or the howls and the screams. We don't know what we're saying to the Bigfoot. It could be a mating call for all we know.
Yeah, I know. It's who shows up?
Here comes that Bigfoot through the woods full speed because he thinks you're a female and he's going to have his way. And I don't encourage it, but like I said, I throw caution into the wind, and I'm guilty of doing that. I want to get a response. I want to hear this thing knock back, or I want to hear it howl back at me. That's what my intent is, and hopefully we can capture something on audio recording. But it's not something that if you're not experienced and you're not prepared for the result, I wouldn't suggest doing it, because it's like the old adjective, be careful what you wish for.
Have you ever come across an area that belongs to maybe to a group of Bigfoot? Because I've heard of this, where people leave them food, and they actually, in other words, they have like a common trading area where people leave things for them, or food and things like that. Have you ever come across that?
No, they call it gifting, and I don't get involved in the gifting stuff. I've never experienced it myself, and I don't know anybody personally that has. I've seen people's stories and different things on social media and the internet when they talk about it. I don't think there's any validity to it. Just simply because I've never experienced it myself, so I can't say that there is. Just what I'm hearing from other people. I don't see why a Bigfoot would want to exchange gifts with people. This is right. It doesn't make sense to me. Why would you leave? My buddy and I were watching a video tonight where people left like this huge smorgasbord of food. We're talking like moon pies, pepperoni pizzas, and fruit. I'm serious. They left jelly beans and all this stuff in hopes to feed the Bigfoot, and they were in turn getting gifts back to them. And that's just ludicrous to me. It's just really.
I know. It's like it's like the Bigfoot are like, you're not going to believe what they've left out there.
Yeah, I don't want your garbage in my woods.
It's like moon pie. What is it?
Yeah, they had two big Domino's pepperoni pizzas and boxes and everything, and different flavored moon pies, and
that's great.
It was amazing. They were showing the video of all this food laid out on this neat little trail in front of these trees, and I was like, said to my buddy Tom, I'm like, this is ridiculous. We were actually laughing to myself.
Also, that's another thing. I mean, God, there's a million animals that are going to come in and devour that.
Yeah, yep.
And it's not going to be the Bigfoot. I mean, how unless you're hiding behind a tree, who's gonna?
Yeah, Bigfoot's probably sitting back there laughing at these people.
Yeah,
shaking his head and saying, "What a moron!"
Exactly. Domino's pizzas are. Yeah, if you think about what their natural diet is,
right?
Unless they're starving, they're not going to go for it. Exactly. Eric, I want to thank you. It's been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. I love your stories.
Thank you,
and I hope you come back. And as a matter of fact, let's see. I mean, we've. God, there's so much going on with the Bigfoot thing that it changes. It's evolved so much. I don't know if it's because of all the interest in it or what. I hate to say it. Part of me is like, I don't want them to find the proof. It's like, there's a mystique about it.
Right.
That it's like maybe as much as people want that proof, like you said, like actual proof, like I've got a live one or hopefully not a dead one, but this is it. There's no, Makes me think that not everything is meant to be found out. Either because one, we humanize them too much. And when I mean humanize them as like what you were talking about, the gifting, all right? Or the other thing that they're totally animals, and some people will say, well, they can be hunted. You see what I'm saying? Because I think that stops a lot of people, because there's always that human aspect. Are you killing something that's human-like or human? So it's not entirely an animal. So I don't know which way, because I'm always afraid of what might happen as a consequence of either one. But let's see.
I'll leave you with this last thought. My mentor, Stan Gordon, has always told me the mystery is so strange that it seems to protect itself.
Good. God, that's great.
And I hope he's right. I hope he's right, because this has been so much fun. I've had a blast doing this the last 40 years.
Of course. Absolutely. Again, thank you. You have been absolutely wonderful. And I want to wish you a very happy new year.
Well, thank you, Marlene. It's been a pleasure being on the show, and look forward to talking to you again. Happy New Year.
Likewise. Take care. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night. Wow, this has been such a great interview, because we talked about Bigfoot and cryptids and ghosts. All of them in one show, which is great. Which is great. Let me tell you something. You know what? When I asked him that thing about had he ever had anything happen at his house, I never thought he was going to tell me that story that you have like a full-blown haunting going on for years. All kidding aside, do you know how much force it takes on a psychic level, let's say, for a non-corporeal being to pull a cupboard or rip it off a wall or throw a bar like what he described? Let me tell you something. That right there, that's like, part of me wants to say that was definitely a non-human entity. As a matter of fact, many years ago, one of the ones that proposed that theory was a gentleman. I should have him right. His name is Kyle Cobb, Cobb. And he described, he says, you know what, Marlene, whenever I go on investigations and I see phenomena that you need a lot of force, in other words, to produce this phenomena, right away, I go in the direction that this is a non-human entity that's causing it. Which, by the way, a lot of people don't realize. You could go into an investigation and you could have human entities there, human ghosts, and you could have a non-human also the reason why I say this is that you'll have some people that say, well, I saw the man, the old man, the lady, the whatever, the shadow that was human, whatever. You could have that. All right. Or even a history of, okay, you know what, the people that used to live here, somebody died, and you could have that. But then you'll have the phenomena like what he described, where these what's happening is so in your face that it's like, this is not my imagination. It's not like, well, it's that, but I really thought it was the other. It's like, this is what it is. Of so much force that it indicates a non-human source. And they're saying, but you know what? I saw that old man that used to live here that died in his bed, and I saw him shuffling down the hall. How come we're having all this going on? This over the top stuff, because you have both things. You have both things. You know what? And it's really interesting because I'm thinking to myself, okay, you know what? I know he said that the prior owners did not mention anything, which you think, well, why would you? Why would you spoil the sale of your house? But then I'm thinking, wait a minute. If you've lived 40 years, a really long time in a house, I can't imagine somebody putting up with 40 years of an extreme situation like this. One thing is if you got a knocking or stuff like that, and it comes and goes, and it might be residual for all you know, even though it's a brand new house. But to live 40 years and have that type of activity, nah, I don't think they would have lasted there 40 years. And whether that sensitive was on the money, as far as that they had picked up a suicide that from that area that decided to drift over there. Sometimes people don't realize that sometimes it's especially in an intelligent haunting, the attraction that you say, well, if they just moved into this place, and let's say there was the suicide there, why did it come over here? Especially if I just moved in, I'm a brand new neighbor. I have no. Sometimes all you need is for somebody in that household to remind that if it's a human entity, remind them of someone they knew. Okay. It could have been him. It could have been his wife. It could have been his son. Something about them. Like the, hey, I if they don't look like them, it reminds them of something and they just drift over. Even though, again, based on what he described, that maybe there was, or let's go down the rabbit hole. Maybe this was a suicide with a non-human entity attached to it, which might have even figured into the suicide itself, the reason for the suicide, or the behavior of that human. So it was like you get two for the price of one. Yeah, it came over, and of course, obviously, her dad, his father-in-law, was running interference. But yeah, that might have been where that suicide had come over with maybe what he had attached in because contrary to what people think, when you have some type of non-human, an attachment, whether it's human or non-human, just because you die, especially if you're stuck, doesn't mean you separate. You still have the attachment. So as to why, it could have been anything. It could have been anything that caused it. But luckily, everything was resolved. It was taken care of. And I'm going to have to because he lives real close to weird Pennsylvania. Because I'm sure he's got a lot of stories, especially when you do it for a long time. This is what I love. When you have somebody that's done something for a long time. And again, I've said this before. Some of these stories, sometimes you're never going to have a point of origin as far as what caused this, or when did it start, or how did it get resolved. And basically what he's doing is when he takes all these stories from all these people that have these experiences, that seeing a dragon, holy crap, you couldn't pry me out of the house with a crowbar after the sun was setting. But okay, like he said, he keeps an open mind, which I find admirable. No matter when you're hearing this, you're like, you've got to be kidding me. The right thing to do is exactly what he does. You take the story as told by the person that witnessed it. All right, that's it. And leave it at that. Whether you personally believe it's true or not has nothing to do with it. Okay? Because that's basically how you develop all these stories, all these eyewitness stories that sometimes you can go back to and compare notes on. And in some cases see, okay, there's a trend. There's this area where this is seen. There's this time of year that it's seen. Or like, let's go to Hollywood land again. Like that movie, It, that's based on the Stephen King novel, where this phenomena of the disappearing kids would happen every X amount of years. All right. And it was, remember, in the movie, the only way that they kind of figured out is that they started doing research and saw that every X amount of years, there would be a string of children disappearing from the little town. My point being that sometimes being able to archive all this story without putting your personal belief, disbelief into it does serve a big purpose, a very big purpose, especially in let's go under the umbrella of the paranormal, whether it's cryptids, ghosts, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it, time travel, take your pick. Archiving is basically invaluable. Which, by the way, when I spoke to Stan, that was one of the most important things. He had been doing this and getting stories for so many years that he was basically one of those, I'm sure, that no matter how weird and out there you told him, he could say, hey, I've heard of that before. And again, some of these things, that gargoyle thing, that's another one. Holy crap. Wow. And some of these things are thinking, okay, this is pretty hard to mistake for something else. Because let's say you go down the, let's say, you mistook a bear for Bigfoot. All right. Nah. But the Thunderbird, whether it's you get the feathered or the non-feathered version, which is I think a pterosaur also, which is, the basically it's like a dinosaur age bird or winged creature, whatever, because whether you want to call it a bird or a winged reptile, I don't know. Or the bird with the feathers. Wow. I got to bring him back. I got to talk to him a lot about that. Anyway, guys, you know what? It's been a long day for me because I just did another show before this. This is why I look like this. Again, happy New Year. Hopefully 2022 will bring a lot of good things for you, yours, all of us. It's about time, right? Again, if you want to get a podcast version without commercial interruptions of any of the shows, go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, go to MarlenePardo.com. I have links there for the MP3 files. I also have links to the different podcast platforms that you will find the version: Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, you name it, I'm on there. You can also find me on Rumble, on BitChute, on Cloud Hub. I have video versions of all of this. You can find me on Roku. If you go to the Rumble channel, it's on Roku. You can find me there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So let's see. I've got a lot of interesting guests coming on. A lot. Yeah. I think you're going to be happy. So come back every week. I think you're going to find that it's a good way to while away the hour or so. And that way, release your mind from all the crazy stuff that's going on in the world and think, man, there's still a lot of stuff that we don't know about. Isn't that great? Yay. Take care, guys. See you next week.